Hello.
Hello.
So I'm just going to jump right into it.
Okay.
You talk a lot about the use of materials on your Instagram and on your blog. And in Vermont, you have a lot of access to your chosen materials, like trees and such. So let's say you lived in a different area and you couldn't source these materials. What would you be using if you could not have access to the trees?
That's a great question. I did previously live in New York, and so that was a issue and part of. I didn't move to Vermont for the trees, but it was part of not having a big enough studio and space and access to materials and stuff like that I left. But I would use any material that inspires me. So I'm also really inspired by the city and construction materials and waste materials. So I get a lot of my glass for free going to glass shops and just asking to go through their dumpsters or them to give me their scraps. And I started working with ideas around nature and using trees and wood after I moved to Vermont. So I think if I lived in a different place, I would get inspiration in a different way about different types of architecture and nature in different settings, because there still is nature in cities or in suburbia. But I think I would use whatever I had access to and source what I needed. I would probably also travel if I had to get what I needed. And then there's also the internet, which helps.
Yeah. Oh, the age of technology.
Yeah.
So you said about living in New York, how there's still nature. I guess following up from that, do you find that your work is a commentary on, the nature and where you live at the time? I guess you already explained that, but you said in your work, it's like humanity's impression on nature. So living in New York City, sourcing those materials, could you go into how that's different with a city environment versus Vermont? Is it specific to where you live, or is it, globally?
Yeah, I think it's more globally, and in a lot of my work, I think of humanity as nature, and specifically female bodies as nature, as like Mother Earth, and then also because we are animals, and when you are carrying a child and then have a child and give birth, it's like the most natural thing in the world. And so I think you become kind of part of the cycle of life, and it also reminds you of your mortality, which then brings you back into the earth. So even in a city or different environment, I think of humanity as natural as well. But then humans have taken themselves a step away from it. And that's where architecture comes in my work, because I think of the geometric rigid boxes that we've created to live in, and to protect us from weather and nature and animals and all the things that can kind of hurt us outside of our architecture, as the thing that is taking us a step away from our connection with nature. So my work kind of deals with these three categories of nature, architecture, and humans, in this kind of swirling way that they're all interconnected, but also all sort of these categories that we've created as humans, to define things, but then they're all intertwined. So I'm interested in those, the kind of gray area in between all of them.
Okay, I'm like fangirling over you really hard. That was really just so interesting. And like connecting as like a person that also feels the same way about like pregnancy and motherhood. I don't know how your pregnancy went, but I like loved every second of it was just so great feeling. Okay, we could talk about that. That's a different interview. Could you talk about the relationship between fingerprints and tree rings? Because in my work, I'm also thinking about tree rings and cycles of life. So I just am interested from a sculptor's perspective on that.
Yeah, I am interested in tree rings and fingerprints for a couple different reasons. One is the obvious one, that the pattern sort of echoes each other. Every fingerprint is unique, obviously, and every tree ring is unique. It has the unique story and history and life of that tree, and then tells the age of that tree. So I think the echoing pattern is really interesting. And then that also brings humans back to nature again, as a repetitive pattern that we can see ourselves in nature and see nature in ourselves. And then I also see the fingerprint as the concept that humans have completely altered the natural environment, and it's humans like mark on nature, because the only way to see a tree ring is if you cut a tree with a saw, because if it were to fall in nature, it would splinter and you wouldn't be able to see that perfect cut. So I think it's so interesting that that perfect little slice that comes out of a tree is like the print of a human. So the human hand is evident in that slice, because that's the only way you'd be able to see it. So there's all these ideas about the fingerprint and the tree rings, and humans' involvement with deforestation, like in Vermont, with actually this is a lot of the East Coast, but the whole state of Vermont was pretty much clear cut multiple times for different industry, and it's come back. I mean, Vermont is super lush, but it's made that there are basically no old growth forests left, or very few old growth forests left in Vermont. And that's basically all of the East Coast. And so even though you walk into a national forest and you think it looks like there's zero humans there, like the human hand is there still and has been there for hundreds of years. So just the complex relationship that humans have with nature is really interesting to me. So I connect that with human fingerprints, and then in other work, the human body as well.
Cool. I have a couple of questions that we could go from there, but I'm just going to keep it about materiality right now.
Okay.
So you already talked about like cutting and getting the perfect little ring. You talked about in your blog using like a new format for placing the glass. I'm not familiar with what you did previously to place glass. Could you talk about how you choose where to put things and that little puzzle piecing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every piece I do with this leaded glass technique, I do a little bit differently. Some I put the glass right next to each other and solder it so that it's a smooth surface, and other ones I layer it on top of each other to make it look like bark. I do it in a variety of different ways, and I've kind of made up this process of working three-dimensionally with flat glass. The closest thing that is like it are like Louis Comfort Tiffany lamps, or chandeliers, because they're 3D and round. But I do my process in a very different way, because I haven't been, luckily and unluckily, I wasn't schooled in how to do a stained glass technique. I watched enough YouTube videos and taught myself how to do it that so I wasn't stuck in the traditional way of doing it, which allowed me the freedom to do it however I want. And so I think I've come up with different ways to work three-dimensionally with glass, and I use the planes of the glass. So I look at 3D models, like either trees or the human body, and look at it as if it's planes or like flat surfaces, and then how I can connect these pieces to mimic the 3D forms. So I'm really interested in the two-dimensionality of glass, and then making a 3D form, and the interplay between two and three dimensionality.
That's so similar to like choreography, I feel like, in a way, looking at things and molding things. I don't know. Again,
Absolutely.
maybe a different conversation, maybe not. Um, okay, going back to the female form, a lot, or even just the human form. I saw you doing like the belly cast work and your husband. Um, has there been a lot of work like that in the past? And now are you like done moving on to tree stumps and then you'll move on to something different? Um, can you talk about um, how that is still influencing your tree cast work? And then also if you plan on doing any more female form work in the future. Also, is that like yourself that you cast? All those
Yes.
like female forms? Oh, girl,
Most of them. Most of them. I have cast other people for other things, but a lot of them are me. Yeah.
that's really awesome. Oh, I just love you. I feel like the person interviewing shouldn't be fangirling so hard. Um,
I
so
feel the same way.
I'm just very interested in like artwork that includes the female form and you making physical casts
Mhm.
of people and yourself.
Mhm.
So about your past with that, if you are going to continue with that, or if that's kind of a done idea.
Yeah, I don't think any ideas are done ideas. Like I look back at notebooks that I had in college, and I'm like, oh, this. Like I think I have a new idea now, and I'm like, nope, I sketched this 10 years ago. So I anticipate definitely coming back to body forms, although I don't have a specific idea of something currently. And my work with trees right now, even though it's not directly, I think of them as still working with body forms. And I mean, with the fingerprint, that's literally a form or part of the body. But even just in the form of a tree, tree pose, like in yoga, I think of anthropomorphizing trees and seeing the human body in trees and trees in the human body. So um, it will probably be connected again in the future. Um, I don't know why I moved away from working directly with body forms. I think I just did it a lot and just wanted to move on to kind of a different series or different concepts, but they're all intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So, and no work that I make is an island and exists on its own. All of my ideas have running themes and they kind of shoot out like branches. Um, and but then they'll come back and connect together. So I think as I keep working, it'll kind of loop back around again.
All right. That's awesome. Segue to my last question, again about materiality. You are constantly saying that glass keeps making an appearance in your work.
Mm-hmm.
So things coming back around and working with that. Do you have like a special relationship with glass? Do you know why it keeps coming back? Do you have like, is it just something that challenges you to work with? I just want to know why you think you keep making with glass.
Yeah, sort of all of the above. I think glass conceptually is such an interesting material. It's rigid but fragile at the same time. It catches light in a really beautiful way. It reflects light, light moves through it. I like currently using window glass as a construction material because it's something that's all around us all the time, but people don't focus on it. If you look through windows in your car, in your house, all day long, and it's a connection to the outside world. It connects inside and outside in our houses and buildings. Skylights connect us to the sky. So, and yeah, it's such a unnatural material, even though it is technically made from natural materials, sand and silica and fire, but it's such a man-made process that has been so far removed from nature that it's just a really interesting material to me. So conceptually, I think that it keeps working its way back in. And then also technically, it is a challenge to work with. I break things all the time, and is sad and frustrating and heartbreaking when I break something that I've been working on for so long. But then that also is inspiring in a weird way, because it has made me partially emotionally have to detach myself from my work, which I think is good. It makes my work not so precious
So
to me.
interesting.
Yeah. But then I also have to be really precise and really on point and care deeply for it in order to not break it. So it's kind of this really interesting relationship that is fraught and hard, but then so satisfying when you make something work really well and not break and really strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you
I,
so
I
much.
could go on and on, but
Yeah, I feel like this is a much longer conversation. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. This was a great interview on both sides.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.